Hey guys, today I wanted to do a deep dive into Arcane, so you will have a better understanding of the world moving forward. I had this video in mind to be easy to understand for anyone who hasn't played the game or read up on any of its lore before. I've played League of Legends for 11 years now, so to see my all-time favorite game come to life has been amazing. I had very high expectation coming into this series, and the show has delivered exceptionally well. Everything from the art they shows to how they built the story, the world, and how they made every character in the show so believable with the voice acting. So I will go through all the major places that exist in the world of Arcane, and the first part of this video will not contain any spoilers from the show, but it might however contain upcoming characters for the show. And I will also make sure to let you know when the actual spoilers for the show will begin. So let's get into it. With the premise of Zaun's struggle against Piltover, the show never really mentions any of the outside world very much. So, to start this off, I want to begin by looking at the world of Arcane, or Runeterra as it's called, and where the show definitely won't go, before reasoning where it will be headed. This show basically takes place right in the center of it all, and looking towards the far edges of the map, we can see the misty waters of the Shadow Isles. This is the place for undead, with creatures that are way beyond anything we've seen in the show as of yet, with creatures like Thresh, who has a lantern that he uses to collect people's souls with, or the dashing Ruined King himself, who can basically mind control anyone. And there's also someone who digs graves. Just south of Piltover, we have Ixtal. So, what is there to say about Ixtal? It's a jungle filled with furries. Then we have Shurima, and for those of you who have followed the lore will know that Shurima already has a lot of history and story written already. This will be an amazing empire to see come to life for sure, and for you who haven't followed the lore before, what might be interesting to know is that Shurima is basically ancient Egypt, with things like Nasus, who is Anubis inspired, and people having to do blood offerings to awaken an entire empire from dust. Now this story is way too big to try and explain in season 2 already, but it wouldn't be surprising if we would see Shurima at least being introduced or mentioned in season 2. Next up is Targon. This has more or less something like Asgard or Greece mythology to it, where there are godlike warriors who have been in contact with a celestial creature known as Aurelian Soul, who might be one of the most powerful, or at the very least largest beings known to Runeterra. And if you haven't played League before and want to understand how someone like Caitlyn could fight this gigantic creature, here's a pretty good summary of it.
In my sight. A summoner has disconnected.
Now, this is obviously endgame type of things that will be very carefully touched upon once we get there. And then, to the far north, we have the Freljords. These are Vikings, Yetis, ice trolls, and even a man with poros. The only reference we have to Freljord is that Jace in a flashback seemed to be in some sort of a blizzard, and we also saw the most adorable little Poro running alongside with Professor Heimerdinger. So unless they don't dig deeper into Jace's flashback, we won't be seeing much of Freljord in Season 2. Demacia is a people who refuse the use of magic and are instead a proud people who fight with honor and duty above all else. This would be an interesting conflict to see in the show, but much like Shurima, this is filled with a lot of rich lore on its own, and we'll most likely see it at least being brought up in Season 2, but it won't be a focal point of the season. Ionia is a primitive people who live in secluded places around their islands, each using magic in a harmonious way. We have characters like Shen, who can see beyond the veil all around him, and even let others see it for themselves. And then, one of my all-time favorite champions, Master Yi, uses Wuju style to defeat entire Noxian warbands alone, and to quote the lore, "To astonishing eyes, he swept across the front lines in a blur, routing the enemies with blinding swordsplay never before seen by outsiders." There are also the famous brothers Yasuo and Yone and their history. And also more furries. Now, all this to say, this island will be featured heavily in upcoming seasons without a doubt, and this is also one place where Singed will actually be able to display his real power as well. But for now they haven't made any suggestions that this would be where the story is taking us, so for now it will have to wait. Last but not least, we have Bilgewater. This one is interesting because when we saw Silco down in his chamber in Act 1, I actually thought this was where the show was heading next. Seeing that giant tentacle creature in the distance and the looming fish while Silco gave his speech made it seem like it was a possibility, especially when you know there is Laui, a prophet of the great Kraken, who uses a golden idol to rip her foes' spirits from their bodies and shatter their perception of reality. But nevertheless, nothing else hinted that this was the case. It's worth to mention that there is a place called Bandle City, the place where Yordles come from, Heimerdinger, and there is also a place called the Void, but that is not something that will be brought up right now. So, this leads us to the spoiler part of the video. So, if you haven't watched Act 1 or 2 already, please do that. And if you don't want spoilers for Act 3 or Season 2, now's the time to bail. So, first of all, in all of Arcane, they don't waste a single second of your time for something that doesn't matter. This leads us to crowd pleasing and foreshadowing. Now, the cute Poro that Heimerdinger had around him, that's crowd pleasing, both for massive fans of League, but also newcomers who just sees a cute little thing. Then, Arcane showed this crow. Now this crow was first introduced through a teaser that they had for Arcane, and for anyone who plays League, they will know of the Grand General himself, Swain. So who is Swain? He's like Odin in the regards that he can see through the crows. And sure enough, it seems like Riot confirmed it. In Arc 2 finale, at the most heartwarming and touching moment we get, when Vi finally gets to hold her sister again, when all hope finally seems. Yeah, not so crowd pleasing, is it? Could it be placed there for the insane people like me grasping at straws? Maybe, but we would come back to crowd pleasing and foreshadowing, and the fact that Arcane doesn't waste a single second if it doesn't add up to something. And the moment Jinx drops the Hex gem, the crow reacts to it, but still remains. It's not until the fight is about to break out that the crow actually flies away. So if this is Swain, the Grand General, who is he general of? They're called Noxus and have the philosophy that the strongest shall lead, whether you are some street rat or from a famous house. And this would lead us to believe that Swain wants this power, whatever it may mean for him. This can be seen when looking what Noxus would use magic for, which is weaponize. Now, just some more things in the show that would lead us to believe it's Noxus that will be the main conflict in Season 2 outside of Piltover and Zaun. First, we have the Council and them bringing up Noxus in conversation and also giving the foreshadowing of conflict when talking about their reaction of getting vinegar instead of wine. A minor thing for many, a huge insult to a Noxian. And do keep in mind, all of the other places I've mentioned earlier was never mentioned in the show, but Noxus is even mentioned in the spotlight. But if any of this wasn't proof enough, the teaser for Act 3 is the icing on the cake. In this shot we see Crimson Red, famous among the Noxians. Although it's not the same symbol that we normally see from Noxus, this might even imply this person is of higher stature than the rest. Also, in episode 5, Mel says, "The Medardas usually only take from the world." Not only that, but do you remember the painting she did in episode 6? Well, that's the Immortal Bastion, the capital of Noxus, with ships looking more or less just like the teaser does. So this would lead us to believe that this lady and Mel are related somehow, and not only that, but she has come to take what is owed to them. Now, I want to throw this in just as a last mention. This guy right here, this might be the crab monster we know as Urgot. Before he's known as Urgot, he's known as a giant Noxian dude wielding an axe, who we later learn that he was betrayed and gets set up to eventually become a slave for Zaun. Obviously this one is just speculation, it could be anyone, but I will say I have a good hunch for it. So, what does this mean for the upcoming act and season? For the upcoming act, I wouldn't expect Noxus to be a big part of it, maybe showing up towards the end with a cliffhanger or something like that, a war erupting between Piltover and Noxus. However, for the next season, it seems like we will see the conflict between the crazy monsters of Zaun coming to life, everything from Singed, Warwick and Victor, but also the struggle that Piltover now faces towards the rest of the world. Noxus coming to take what is theirs, Demacia looking to shut it down, and Ionia living in peace until the real monsters show up. So, before Act 3 is finally released, I wanted to throw out some of my wild theories to see if any of them stick. I'll give you a quick rundown. Marcus, you remember that asshole? He'll eventually become Mundo. Not only that, he will also be the one to kill Silco. You remember that wizard we saw save Jay's mom? It's Victor from another timeline. Confusing shit. Not only that, he will also travel in time in this timeline to destroy Piltover in front of the eyes of Heimerdinger. But that is just my theory after all. And if you have any thoughts of what you think we will see, or what you would like to see, please do let me know down in the comments. And if there is anything you would like me to deep dive into, I would be happy to. And if you've managed to listen to me this far, much love to you. Please do leave a like, subscribe, and share to anyone who might enjoy it. Until next time. Hi hi.